My name is Nora Whitfield. I am 68. I spent 37 years as a school librarian. After my husband's funeral, I folded the black dress, set the kettle to a hiss, and made a decision that tasted like metal. I would not mention the second villa. I would not mention the $690,000 he left me. I would keep the door of my life on its own hinges. After my husband's funeral, I never mentioned the second villa or the $690,000 he left me. A week later, my daughter said, "Start packing. The house is sold." I smiled. I had already packed, but they weren't my boxes. The phone rang all morning. I let it ring until the house forgot the sound. In the kitchen, steam curled from my white teacup. The glaze was spidered with hairline cracks. I slid a roll of packing tape across the counter. Its voice tore the air in one clean rip. The first label read, "For Laura." The second, "For Ben." The third, "For the life I built while you were not looking." On the dining table, I laid out artifacts the way I used to lay out exhibits for the school history fair, not with anger, with accuracy. The porcelain ballerina Laura begged for one Christmas, the piano lesson book she abandoned in May, the varsity photo Ben left in our attic when he married. Wrap, tuck, seal. The tape sang. My silence answered. I am not cruel. I am precise. When Laura texted, "Start packing," I stood in the doorway of the room she called my space in her basement. I pictured the dehumidifier's wheeze, the low ceiling, the storage bins stacked like verdicts. I pictured myself shrinking to fit a corner of their plans. The kettle clicked. I poured. The tea darkened. The air smelled like bergamot and goodbye. On the counter sat a single index card. In Edward's hand, he had once written, "Do not explain, just go." The ink had bled where a raindrop met the word go. The mark looked like a small compass pointing east. I pressed the card flat and breathed until my ribs counted to 10. The doorbell thudded. The movers stepped in. I nodded toward the stacks. "Deliver these to my daughter's address. Ring the bell. Tell her they are gifts from her mother. Keepsakes are meant to be kept." The foreman tilted his head. He did not ask why. He lifted the first box. The tape line held. The printed words. "For Laura" rode past him like a banner. I pocketed my phone. I let it buzz against silence. "Start packing," my daughter had said. "The house is sold." I stood in the home my hands had polished and my knees had cleaned. The windows I opened for spring. Not sold, I thought. Not this. Not me. My mind pulled tight on small things. The teacup's pale chip. The scissor bite in cardboard. The tiny thread at the cuff of my sleeve. There is a kind of justice that does not raise its voice. It stacks the facts. It opens a door. It walks through. My name is Nora. I am 68. Librarian by habit, even in retirement. Keeper of records no one noticed until now. After my husband's funeral, I spoke to no one about the second villa or the money. I packed what needed to travel. I labeled what needed to stay. And when my daughter told me to leave, I smiled. The boxes were ready. They were hers. I poured new tea. The steam rose in a thin ribbon. The house did not answer. The hallway kept its own weather, gray and narrow. From the dining room, the clock counted the day. Tick, tick, tick. The air felt thin today. I carried the cup into the living room and sat where the fabric on Edward's chair had faded to the soft green of lichen. The cushion remembered his shape better than mine. I set the cup on a coaster, porcelain against cork, a quiet, steady note. Outside, the mail truck sighed and moved on. I listened to the silence that comes after condolences, after casseroles. The phone rang. I let it ring twice. My hand hovered. I lifted the receiver. "Mom, good, you picked up." Laura's voice had the brightness of a sales floor. "We talked to Greg. He has an all-cash buyer, no contingencies, fast closing. Start packing." I kept my gaze on the cup. "You already found a buyer." "It is the market. You have to move when it is hot. Ben is handling the contractor bids. We can get the place broom clean in a week. This is best for everyone. When everything is easy for everyone, it is rarely meant for me. What happens to me? I asked. You will come here, she said. We cleared a room in the basement. You will have your own entrance, your own bathroom. You can decorate, make it cozy. It will be simple. No stress. The basement smelled like bleach and old cardboard, a dehumidifier's hum, the drip that never stops. I pictured a low window with a view of tire treads, a ceiling pipe that ticks in winter. I pictured myself curling into the corner of someone else's plan. You sound tired, Laura said, softer now. I'm trying to make this easy. I balanced the receiver between shoulder and ear. I measured the distance to the cup. I set my palm flat on the table. The wood was cool. Ben says we should move everything while you are still, sorting things. He can list the piano. There is a market for vintage. We can split the proceeds, help you with the transition. I already called the storage place. First month free. The clock did not change its pace. Tick, tick, tick. Laura, I said, who signed the agreement. It is just a letter of intent, she said. Standard, nothing final. The buyer is ready. We should not spook them. This is best for everyone. You will have us close by. You will not be alone. Alone is a wide word. It can mean the quiet after a storm, or the eye of one. I looked at Edward's chair, at the knit throw I mended 2 winters ago, at the small snag that still showed. I pressed the edge of the coaster until it left a circle on my thumb. I will think, I said. Please do not overthink. That is what you do. This house is too big. Dad is gone. You cannot keep up with the stairs, the yard. It makes no sense. We can put fresh paint, make it bright. Greg can have you closed by Friday. Start packing tonight. It will help. She waited. The line breathed in my ear. Are you there? She asked. I reached for the cup, lifted, set it down without drinking. The saucer clicked. I am here, I said. Silence returned between us, not empty. Somewhere in the basement, the heater woke and sighed. I remembered the first winter in this house, how Edward stuck his hand into the vent and laughed, how we moved the couch 3 inches to catch the sun. The chair kept its lichen color. The clock kept the day. Start packing, Laura said again. We will take care of the rest. The phone cord curled around my fingers, a small rope I could have tugged. I did not tug. I pressed the release and set the receiver in its cradle. Not a slam, a choice. The hallway held its gray. The clock kept counting. I lifted the cup. The steam had thinned. The tea was still warm enough to taste. My tea was still warm enough to taste. Outside, clouds gathered over the yard. I carried the cup to the back door and leaned my hip against the frame. The rose bed sat low along the fence, stems angled like bowed heads, leaves silvered by dust. A wind combed through, petals shivered. Rain makes its own time. The first drops tapped the concrete step. I set the cup on the counter and went for the photograph on the mantel. Our wedding picture. Edward in the dark suit he borrowed from his brother. Me with the veil that would not sit straight. The glass had taken a film of the week's breath and cooking. I lifted the frame and carried it to the window where the light is kind. The cloth squeaked once against the glass. I cleaned in slow circles. I should have been packing, according to Laura. Instead, I polished a square of yesterday until it gave its color back. That is the order I know. Restore before remove. Remember before yield. The rain found its voice, and I heard another sound layered inside it. Applause in a gymnasium. I stood beneath the church eaves after the reception, clutching lilies that dropped pollen onto my wrist. When the downpour began, guests dashed for their cars, a slip of white skirts and black umbrellas. Edward laughed. He shrugged out of his jacket and raised his hand above my hair. Not a perfect roof, but his. We ran the length of the sidewalk to the borrowed sedan. I held the bouquet like a flag. Water ran off his knuckles. He opened the passenger door and bowed like a tired magician. I laughed into the rain. The lilies stained my wrist yellow. He always kept me under the eave. Years later, the downspout failed in a March storm. He pulled on boots over pajama pants and went out with a screwdriver. I watched him from this same window. He whistled through his teeth when he solved a small problem. Afterward, he came in wet to the elbows. He set the toolbox on a towel and said, "Roses like a deep drink, not a daily sip. Cut them hard in winter. Feed them once in spring. Do not baby them." Then he kissed my forehead. He smelled like rain and metal. I turned from the window. The yard was taking the rain. The roses were not greedy anymore. They were tired. Bent tips held small brown scars where Japanese beetles had feasted. A nest of weeds crouched near the trellis. The gate clicked again. No one entered. I wiped the back of the frame. The wood carried a small nick from the year Laura pulled it down while dusting and claimed she did not. I remember the argument we did not have. I set the frame back and said nothing. The glass cleared. Our faces brightened a shade. I ran my thumb along the bevel. The cut of the mat tingled under my nail. When Edward was sick, I read aloud by this window. The light fell across his hands. The IV tape made his skin look young, smooth and useless. He asked me once, "If the roses go wild after me, let them." Then he smiled and shook his head. "No, you will keep them better than I did." The next day, he wrote me a note on an index card, 4 words that became a rung on a ladder. "Do not explain, go." The rain slackened. The yard smelled like iron and earth. I set the frame back on the mantel, a small altar to a long promise. I lifted the cup. The tea had cooled. I drank anyway, bitter and right. The house breathed with the weather. The clock kept the hour. I could hear the roof listen. He always kept me under the eave. Now the eave is mine. The rain tapered to a hush. The house held its breath. I faced the photograph of Venice. Edward and I were small on a stone bridge. The canal held a sliver of sky. Below the frame sat the narrow console with a single drawer. Years ago, he said, "If you ever need something I kept for after, look here." I slid the drawer. Old wood resisted. Then it eased with a sigh that smelled like cedar and paper. Inside lay a cream envelope, a manila folder, and a flat banking booklet the color of faded denim. Sunlight inched across the wall and touched the edge of the envelope. The paper brightened as if called by name. I lifted it. My thumb found the ridge where a seal had once been. He had opened it carefully and kept it whole. The flap rasped as I drew it back. Air moved, dry and cool. The folder held documents stamped in blue and red. Notary seals flowered in the margins. A paper ribbon bore a number with the gravity of a verdict. I read slowly. A deed of sale recorded in Malaga, a parcel in Andalusia, a white facade, a terrace facing the sea. The word villa appeared with calm certainty. A management agreement listed inspections, dates in neat columns. One signature from a woman named Isabel confirmed the garden had been watered and trimmed. I set the deed on the table and opened the banking booklet. The cover creased under my palm. Inside, the columns were exact, deposits marked as annuity and dividends, transfers arriving with the regularity of tides. The final balance sat at the bottom line. 600, 90,000. The zeros held still. I waited to feel dizzy. I did not. Instead, a quiet unhooking moved through me. A clasp beneath my ribs let go. I closed the booklet and laid it over the deed like a small, steady roof. At the bottom of the envelope lay a smaller slip, edges feathered, print named 2 cities, a date from a year when our hair was still mostly brown, a train ticket. On the back, in his hand, a sentence ran true. "One day we will go." The O in 1 had blurred where a raindrop met fresh ink, a tide the size of a breath. I pressed the ticket to my sternum and listened. The room gave me the clock and the hush that follows rain. My breath steadied. I took the folder to the window and let daylight do its work. A site map waited. A rectangle marked terrace. Arrows traced the sun in June and December. My fingertip followed a street name, Calle de las Flores. The sound tasted like citrus and salt. I pictured a gate with a latch that knew my hand, bougainvillea over white stone, a table for 2 plates and a bowl of lemons, a chair angled to catch the late light, the sea speaking in a language I could learn. I returned the documents to the folder. I did not shove, I stacked, deed beneath, agreement above, booklet on top, the ticket between glossary and map. I slid the manila back into the drawer and left the cream envelope out on the console. The sunlight had climbed. Its edge glowed like a slim blade. I lifted our wedding frame and polished a thumbprint I had missed. His borrowed suit looked newer. My veil stopped arguing with the wind. If he stood beside me now, he would say it in the bare way he had. Pack what you need. Take water. Leave the rest. I am not reckless. I am exact. I stood with my hand on the drawer pull until my pulse slowed and a sentence found its place. One day is today. The clock answered. The house breathed again. The rain left the porch rail. I slid the ticket into my wallet. I pressed the folder flat. I closed the drawer. The sound was a low, certain note. In the kitchen, the kettle waited. The cup waited. The road in my mind stopped being a line and became a door. The door had a key, already warm now in my pocket. With the ticket tucked in my wallet, I baked a pan of lemon bars, the house filled with a clean sweetness that steadied me. I wrapped the squares in wax paper, tied them with cotton string, and drove to the new place where Ruth Green now lived. The brochure called it a luxury senior residence. The lobby smelled like citrus cleaner and fresh paint. A dry fountain whispered in the lobby. No coins gleamed. No wishes waited. Only a scripted welcome inside. A young attendant checked my name and smiled a trained smile. Room 3B, she said. Elevators to the left. On the 3rd floor, the hallway was hotel quiet. Carpet so soft it drank sound. I knocked. Ruth called, "Come in." She stood beside a window that did not open. A navy cardigan hung on her shoulders as if it remembered better furniture. The room held a couch, a television, 2 end tables, and a wall that was not yet anything. No nails, no frames, a wide expanse of white. I offered the lemon bars. "I thought you could use something tart," I said. She laughed once, not unkind. "Bless you, I miss flavor." She set the plate on a tray and patted the couch cushion. "Sit." "How are you finding it?" I asked. Ruth looked at the blank wall. Her shoulders lowered a notch. "The kids say it is perfect. Restaurant dining, activities, a shuttle to the mall." She pressed her palm to the paint. It did not mark. I thought I was helping my kids. By the time it was done, I realized I had signed away my life. Her words did not rise. They settled. She pointed to a stack of cardboard frames the staff delivered this morning. They were meant for a collage that could be removed without holes. She smiled at the idea with a tired grace. "I used to choose frames. Now I choose adhesives." I glanced at the closet. Inside hung a neat column of clothes that told the same story in different fabrics. "Where is your music?" I asked. "The ukulele fits no drawer here," she said. "Mark says strings collect dust. He says I can enjoy concerts on the big screen downstairs." She shrugged. It hurt to watch. I told her Laura had found an all-cash buyer, that there was a plan for my basement life, that the word easy had been used like a salve on a wound that needed stitches. Ruth listened without interruption. When I stopped, she took a lemon bar, bit, and closed her eyes as if a small light had turned on behind them. "Do not sign if your heart has not agreed," she said. I wish someone had said that aloud to me while there was still space to hear it. We walked the room together as if we could rearrange fate. She moved a chair 2 inches. The view remained a parking lot. She lifted a frame from the stack and held it up to the blank wall. Our reflections floated in the plastic like misplaced visitors. She lowered the frame and gripped my hand. "Nora, you were always the one who steadied field trips, who knew which kid would cry after the planetarium. Steady yourself now." The attendant knocked and asked if we wanted to join the mindfulness group at 4. Ruth glanced at me and smiled with one half of her mouth. "I have practiced enough mindfulness to know what I lost," she said. We declined together. Before I left, Ruth pressed the cotton string from the lemon bars into my palm as if it were a ribbon. "Promise me one thing. If you choose the sun, send a picture of the first wall you claim." I promised. At the door, I looked back. The white wall waited like an unopened letter. Ruth's shadow rested against it, small and exact. I left Ruth's building with the cotton string looped around my fingers. It felt like a quiet ribbon I had not earned yet. Marisol's office sat over a florist. The stairwell smelled of carnations and toner. Inside, a fountain clicked softly. When she shook my hand, her grip said we would speak plainly. "We will review everything once. Then, you will breathe," she said. Paper lifted. She laid 3 stacks between us. The residence, the brokerage accounts, the Andalusian property, all titled in your name. No co-owners, no liens, no pending claims. No sale can occur without your signature. I let the sentence sit until my ribs loosened. My daughter believes there is a buyer. "She may believe many things," Marisol said, not unkind. "Belief is not a conveyance. The deed is here." She tapped the top page. The notary seal winked. "Your husband retitled 3 years ago. He removed collateral interests. He created a revocable trust. Everything pours to it. You are sole trustee. Meaning, I am not a guest in my own life. Meaning, you own the keys." She opened the second stack. Brokerage positions, a conservative mix, dividend income consistent, taxes filed on time. She moved to the third stack. Spain. The villa holds clear title, a management contract with Isabel, monthly inspections, garden care per season, utilities on standby, council taxes prepaid. The property is ready to occupy whenever you choose. Whenever I choose. The words felt like windows opening in a house that had been painted shut. Marisol reached for a slim folder with a red tab. He left a letter, time delivery, 1 month after death. She set an envelope before me, cream paper, my name in his square, careful hand. The room narrowed to the rasp of my breath and the quiet burble of the fountain. I broke the seal with a nail. The sound was small, final. "Nora, if you are reading this, I am not beside you to say what should have been said out loud more often. You are not a burden. You are the spine of this family. You kept us standing for 40 years. Now keep yourself. Do not measure your worth by anyone's convenience. The house, the accounts, the villa, all are yours to keep, to sell, to gift, or to guard. Choose what is yours without apology. Do not explain. Just go." Ink had bled slightly where the word go met a droplet, a comet with a brief tail. I read the lines twice, then folded the page along its old crease and pressed my thumb to the fold until heat moved from skin to paper. Marisol slid a pen toward me, a fine nib, the kind that says signatures matter. "I recommend simple protections, certified copies of your deeds and trust, a letter of instruction to any agent who calls regarding the house, all inquiries routed to me. If family pressures you, you may hand them my card. You owe no immediate answers." I nodded. "Make the copies, draft the letter, place everything in a binder I can carry. I want a card for travel. I want the utility accounts in Spain confirmed. I want nothing urgent when I land." "We can do that by end of day," she said. Her pen touched paper. A warm scratch filled the room. The fountain answered. I slipped Edward's letter back into the envelope and slid it into my purse. The weight was not heavy. It was exact. in the glass of a framed diploma. I saw a woman who looked like me, hair pinned back, shoulders squared, eyes not young, not finished. I had kept a family standing for 4 decades. Now I would keep myself. Marisol gathered the stacks, clipped them clean, handed me a claim ticket for later pickup. "You are not alone in this," she said. "I know," I answered, and for the first time in weeks the sentence felt true. Outside, the florist door chimed. Air carried the green of stems. Sun fell in a bar across the sidewalk. I held the envelope a moment longer, paper against palm, a pulse answering. Then I put it away and walked toward the light. I left Marisol's office with the envelope in my bag and a steadier spine. Afternoon light lay warm across the floor. At home, I cleared the dining table the way I once laid out book fairs. Boxes folded, tape, a black marker, blank labels. I wrote the first name without hurry, for Laura. From the hall closet, I lifted the porcelain ballerina, one ankle repaired long ago. I wrapped her in tissue and settled her in a box. Next, the album with paper corners, birthdays, missing teeth, cake, hands clapping. I pressed the cover. Ben's shelf kept its own dust. A varsity photo, a rattling trophy, programs from Friday nights, a tin of bolts from his first job. I boxed them, wrote for Ben, let the marker squeak once. The piano waited like a truth. No one wants to move. A pale ring marked the lid. I slid the bench back, lifted the seat, found the lesson books Laura abandoned in 7th grade. Finger numbers hovered above notes. Eraser ghosts shone where she changed her mind. I stacked the books, tied them with cotton string, added a tag for Laura. The moving crew arrived in a truck with a liftgate and the calm of men who have seen every kind of goodbye. One measured the hallway, the other wrapped the piano in quilted pads. The dolly tilted. Wheels bit the rug. The liftgate whined. The body rose inch by inch. I sealed each box. The tape ripped the air. The seams lay down and obeyed. On every lid, I placed a second label in smaller hand. Keepsakes are meant to be kept. I tucked a card for the foreman. Deliver to my daughter and to my son-in-law. Ring the bell. Tell them these are gifts from their mother. He read, nodded, slid the card into his pocket. The phone rang as the last strap cinched across the piano. I answered. "What are you doing?" Laura said. "Ben says a truck is coming to our place. Are you selling the piano? Why are there boxes leaving your house?" "They are not for sale," I said. "They are going home." "Mom, this is not helpful. We have a cash buyer waiting. You should be packing clothes, papers, practical things. Greg is ready to list. Timing is everything." "When everything is easy for everyone," I said, "it is rarely meant for me." She blew out a breath. "This makes you look unstable. You always get sentimental and literal. Please stop complicating what could be simple." The lift gate sang. Again. The dolly rolled. The truck door slammed. A heavy note that rattled the frames. "What is in those boxes?" she demanded. "The ballerina, the recital books, your albums, the pieces you meant to keep, Ben's trophies and programs, the bolts he promised to sort. That piano will not fit in our living room. You told me you and Ben would handle the logistics." I said, "This is logistics. This is petty. This is precise," I said. "You asked me to start packing. I heard you." Silence stretched. I let it be. The crew chief signed the manifest and handed me the pen. His palm was dry and steady. "This is not how families do things," Laura said at last. "Families do many things," I said. "Today I'm sending things back to their rightful owner." The marker had left a ridge in my fingers. The label corners lay flat. The seams did not lift. "Please do not send anything else without asking us first," she said. "I will keep that in mind," I answered. Outside, the engine turned over. The lift gate folded. The door locked into its groove with a clap. The foreman tipped 2 fingers in a salute and climbed inside. The truck eased away. Space opened behind it. I set the marker parallel to the tape and straightened the stack of labels. The phone lay warm in my hand. I placed it face down, not a refusal, a boundary. One last box waited against the wall, its label already written, its future chosen. I smoothed the paper until it warmed, until the glue held, until each letter lay flat and sure. The truck turned the corner and the block exhaled. The quiet felt clean. I set the marker in its drawer, wiped the table with a towel, and stood long enough to hear the fridge hum. The air held steady. My phone vibrated against the wood. A rectangle of light bloomed. Laura, I miss you. The words landed like a childhood afternoon, her hair damp from the sprinkler, grass on her knees, how she fell into me without breaking. I wanted to answer with a picture of the kettle, with the truth that I missed her too. The screen blinked again. A second line hardened the first. Once the sale is done, everything will be easier for everyone. Hope is fragile. It shatters with a small sound. I pressed the side button. The screen went dark. The house returned to itself. I stood with the phone and let silence make a choice I might have argued away if I kept talking. I placed the phone face down, a boundary, a line that kept its shape. The kitchen light had shifted toward evening. The bulb over the table poured a warm circle. I pulled a sheet of craft paper from the drawer where I keep recipes I no longer measure. The fibers showed like faint grain. I uncapped a pen. The nib caught light. The first stroke felt like stepping onto a dock that did not sway. "Dear Laura," I wrote, then paused for air. I steadied my hand and let the words choose pace over heat. I did not add the second villa. I did not count dollars. This was not accounting. This was a ledger of nights. "You grew because someone stayed awake," I wrote. "You learned because someone set out clothes and snacks and signed forms with the same pen that paid for your braces. Love is understanding the cost of every sleepless night, not in resentment, in recognition. When you ask me to make it easy for everyone, you forget the person who taught you what easy feels like. I crossed no lines about money. I drew lines about dignity. You are my daughter, not my creditor. I will not sell my home to buy your comfort. I will not move into a basement to soothe your fear. I am not punishing you. I am protecting what is left of me." I set the pen down, lifted the cup, tasted bergamot, wrote again. "If one day you understand, I will be where the light is," I wrote. "Come as my child, not as a buyer with a clock in her hand. There will be a chair for you, a door that opens, a garden where we can start again without witnesses." I signed my name. The loops looked older and true. I folded the page once. The crease ran clean. I placed the letter in the center of the table and set my white teacup on its edge, like a small paperweight. The lamp held the room in honey. The counters kept their shine. I rinsed the towel, wrung it, hung it over the oven handle. I gathered the tape, the labels, the cotton string, returned each to its drawer. I slid the chair in so it met the table. Then I stood at the threshold and checked the scene the way I used to check the library after the last bell. Tables clear, lights low, the important thing obvious. On the counter, the phone lay mute, a black square, solved for now. The letter glowed under the lamp. I whispered the line to hear if it could hold. "Love is understanding the cost of every sleepless night." The words did not break. At the doorway, I looked back once more. "If one day you understand, I will be where the light is." I flipped the switch. The room kept a memory of gold, then gentled into dusk. At dawn, the house was a shell of soft sounds, the heater ticking down, the fridge breathing in its sleep. I set my suitcase upright by the door and listened to the wheels settle. The letter lay centered on the kitchen table under the white teacup, the lamp a small sun I had already switched off. I carried the chime of my key ring in my palm, brass and nickel, the porch key cool as a coin from winter. I walked from room to room the way I used to lock the library, touch and look, lights low, windows latched, questions answered. The living room held its green chair, the knit throw folded square, the clock with its stubborn heart. In the hallway, I paused at the family photos, hands on shoulders, peaks of birthday hats, a smear of frosting on a grin that belongs to a girl with grass on her knees. I let the glass reflect me, older, still here. At the back door, I opened the curtain and checked the roses. Night had laid dew on the leaves. The stems looked less tired. The rain had done what it could. Edward once said, "Roses like a deep drink. Let them reach. Do not baby them." I set 2 fingers on the glass. Cold bled through. I told the yard I would be gone for a while, and that it could hold its own. My suitcase made the small complaint of rubber on tile. I tilted the handle. The wheels took the haul. The sound felt like a line being drawn across a map. In the entryway, I stopped where the light from the porch lamp pools a little. I looked at the scuff we never sanded out of the baseboard. Ben and a skateboard. Laughter, a thud, apologizing eyes. Memory is a chorus that sings from behind you. This morning, it stayed on a single note. Keys in the right hand, handle in the left, breath in the chest. I locked the side window, checked the back latch, turned the deadbolt on the garage, each click like a bead sliding on a cord. At the front door, I laid my palm on the wood. The grain ran like long water. I had painted this door in August heat, sanded between coats, watched it drink color until it shone back the sun. Do not explain, just go. I said it once aloud. The words cleared the hall like a bell. I stepped onto the porch and faced the street. Morning was pale. A neighbor jogged past and lifted 2 fingers. I answered with a nod. I pulled the door until the latch kissed, turned the key, felt the pins rise and fall, heard the clean consonant of the lock closing. The sound was a small, exact promise. At the curb, the car waited with a trunk that knew the size of a suitcase. The wheels bumped down the steps. The handle retracted with a hiss. I placed the bag, closed the lid, and stood for one more breath. The house watched without windows, a shape I knew as well as my hands. The airport carried its own weather, announcements braided with rolling bags, coffee and jet fuel, mothers counting children with their eyes. I moved through it like a person who had somewhere to be. At security, I slipped my shoes into a gray bin, set the keys atop my folded scarf, watched the tray disappear, watched it return. My fingers closed around the ring the second it cleared. Home is not a structure. Sometimes it is the sound a key makes when it meets your skin. At the gate, I chose a chair by the window and let planes push and pause across the glass. I did not check messages. The letter on my table back home had my voice in it already. There was nothing more to say today. A young couple argued gently about overhead space. An older man slept with a newspaper as a roof. The board changed from wait to now. On the jetway, I felt the incline of a new sentence. The wheels hummed over the seam between building and plane. I stepped across it, a quiet crossing. In my seat, I buckled the belt. I placed the keys in the small pocket of my sweater like a talisman. When the engine surged, I let the sound carry the last of my doubt. This door closes so another opens to sun. The wheels lift. I hold the key ring. I let silence carry me forward. The plane dipped across a belt of blue. Malaga rose from the water like white chalk. When the cabin door opened, warm air lifted the tired smell of travel. I followed the slow river of passengers through passport control. The officer stamped without ceremony. The sound was a rubber kiss that said, "Begin." A woman with silver hair held a hand-lettered sign, Isabel. She pronounced my name with music. Her handshake felt like woven fabric, firm, kind. "You must be Nora. Welcome," she said, the vowels wide as daylight. Outside the sliding doors, the light turned ordinary things to praise. Taxi roofs, a bus bench, the curve of a clay pot. The breeze carried lemon from somewhere unseen. Soft heat softened the edges of everything. We drove along a road that kept glancing at the sea. White houses gathered on hillsides, laundry tilted like flags, awnings breathed. Isabel pointed once. Palms, a market. A bakery that would remember my favorite loaf by Friday. I rolled down the window 2 inches. The scent of salt pressed my throat open. Gulls stitched cries above the windshield. Edward was proud of this place. He said you would make it sing, Isabel said. She turned into a narrow lane where sunlight laced itself between buildings. We stopped at a gate painted the color of steamed milk. Over it poured bougainvillea, petals like small paper hearts, magenta against white so bright it made my eyes water. I put my fingers under a cluster and lifted it. It felt lighter than the color promised. Isabel unlocked the gate. The latch clicked with a precise cheer. The courtyard opened. Terracotta tiles held the day's warmth. A lemon tree leaned its shoulder toward the terrace. Fruit glowed like lamps. Somewhere a radio practiced a folk song at low volume. A guitar counted time beneath it. We stood for a moment and let the place introduce itself. Salt, time, clean stone, one distant bark, one bicycle bell. Inside, the rooms kept their palette of air and light. White walls, blue shutters, built-in shelves, a table set for 2 even though I was 1. Isabel set a basket on the counter, bread, cheese, olives, a small bottle of oil, a folded note with a number to call if a shutter learned to rattle. She opened a window. Birds answered. The curtain lifted and settled like a breath. Keys, she said, and placed them in my palm. Front, terrace, side gate. Metal touched skin. Something underneath me steadied. We walked out to the terrace. The sea lay beyond the rooftops, a plain line of silver under the afternoon sun. It made a horizon I could believe. I filled my ribs the way you fill a jar to keep flowers from tipping. Air slid in without negotiation. No one asked me to make room for their plans. Isabel asked if I needed anything else. I said thank you. Not now. She gave me the gardener's schedule and the name of a cafe where the waitress says darling to everyone with clean sincerity. She squeezed my hand. Her bracelets chimed. Then she left by the side gate, careful to set the latch. Alone, I stood beneath the bougainvillea. The petals clicked softly against one another. The plant made its own weather of shade and color. I pressed my shoulders back until my spine found its simple line. Here, silence is the gentlest voice. I shaped the sentence and let it rest. Not a vow, a practice. Sunlight walked across the white wall. A small bird landed on the terrace rail and regarded me like another newcomer. I breathed. The breath did not stop part way. It went all the way down and returned with something I recognized. The air held salt and lemon. The hours ahead were unassigned. I touched the gate key once more and smiled. The day said, begin again. I carried the basket to the kitchen and set it on the counter. The room smelled of new soap and salt that had walked in on my sleeves. I opened the cupboards. White shelves, blue rims painted on the plates. Each bowl wore a thin band of cobalt. I stacked the dinner plates by size, 2 on the lowest shelf, the rest higher, as if company were an idea for later. I lined the cutlery in the top drawer, forks nested, knives turned inward, spoons caught a stripe of light. Outside the window, the sea counted itself in even breaths. I set a small pot on the stove and watched water bead and tremble before it broke into a boil. Olive oil ran like sunlight into a pan. A clove of garlic gave its first sentence. Tomatoes softened into a modest sauce. I tore bread, warmed it on the grate, and set out a wedge of cheese Isabel had slipped into the basket. I cracked an egg into the pan and let it poach in the tomatoes. Steam lifted a soft white shoulder. The air turned bright with garlic and tomato. The smell felt like a yes. I carried a plate to the terrace table. 1 knife, 1 fork, a cloth napkin folded to a simple square. I left the other chair for air and light. The first bite tasted like relief, the second like food. By the third, I was hungry. The sea kept a patient metronome. When I finished, I wiped the plate with bread and smiled at the private goodness of it. After dishes, I dried the sink and set the kettle. While I waited, I opened the suitcase that held things not in any inventory, a framed photograph from our wedding day, the one I cleaned before I left. The frame had a nick in the corner, small and familiar. I placed it on the windowsill where late light would find it. Edward looked out over the sink now, not as a ghost, as a witness with kind eyes. I set my teacup on the sill beside the frame. Steam purled against the glass. Beyond it, the water lifted and fell, a kind of breathing I could match easily each hour. The kettle began to hiss. I spooned tea into the white cup that has followed me from house to house, the tiny chip on its lip taken long ago by an impatient spoon. Steam rose. The window breathed in and out. I leaned and listened to what the day held, the sea's steady sentence. No one called, but the heart answered. I rinsed the cutting board and stood it on edge, wiped the counters with a cloth that smelled faintly of lemons. I cracked the window until the curtain lifted and stilled. I kept a small pan low and moved a larger one high, learning by where my hand wanted to go. The room accepted this new map without complaint. Before dusk, I swept the floor, a few crumbs, a bit of sand, the soft rasp of straw across tile. I shook the broom on the terrace and watched dust scatter back into light. Inside, I set the broom in its niche. I returned to the windowsill. I straightened the frame a fraction. It did not need much. I touched the glass with 2 fingers, not to summon anything, just to mark where the new day met the old. Tea cooled. I drank it anyway. The taste was clean and a little bitter, like a good decision. I closed the cupboard doors and left 1 cup on the sill for morning. Night would arrive when it was ready. In this kitchen, I would learn the names of small sounds, which hinge speaks, which tile keeps the sun last, where to stand to hear the first gull at dawn. I turned off the light and let the window hold the rest. Night thickened outside the open window. The sea kept time like a steady drum. I set my phone on the counter, screen down, and rinsed the teacup. Steam ghosted the glass, then faded. The first buzz arrived as I hung the towel, the second as I turned the latch on the terrace door. I flipped the phone over. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail from Laura, 1 from Ben, a third from an unknown number. I pressed play and let the speaker carry their voices into the small kitchen. Laura first, bright and tight. Mom, I am very worried. Greg says you have refused to engage. He has already invested time. He can file for fees. If you do not cooperate, we will consider legal steps. I want this amicable. Please sign. Let us take care of you. Ben next, the tone he uses with customers who argue about a bill. Nora, this is getting messy. You are making irrational choices. The piano was uncalled for. Laura is under stress. Be reasonable. We can set you up by the weekend. The basement will be comfortable. If you keep blocking the sale, we will protect our interests. The last voice did not offer a name. She represented the buyer and recited a deadline that sounded like a threat wrapped in courtesy. I stood with the phone on the counter and listened to the fridge breathe between sentences. The screen pulsed again. 4 texts stacked like tiles. Mom, call me now. We need to confirm you are safe. If you do not respond, I will call a wellness check. Another line. We think you might be unstable. Another. We cannot keep waiting. I pressed the side button. The notifications blurred, then the screen slept. Silence returned. Not empty. It was the shape of a choice. I opened the voicemail log, pressed my thumb on the first message, and watched the tiny trash can bloom red. Delete, click. The second, delete, click. The third, delete, click. Each sound was precise, a metronome for a new piece I was learning. I set the phone face down, the camera toward the ceiling. I did not draft an answer. Marisol's card waited in my purse. The documents waited at her office. The law could speak for me if speaking became necessary. My part was simpler. Do not explain, just go. In this hour, going meant refusing the choreography they were teaching my feet. I opened the window another inch. The curtain lifted. Cool air folded across my arms. The sea kept its drum. A scooter buzzed once and faded. A neighbor laughed. Then the night stitched itself closed. The phone hummed again. One more voicemail. I let it finish. Laura's voice had softened. Exhaustion or strategy. "Mom, please, we do not know where you are. You are not answering. I need to know you are all right. Call me. We can make a plan that works for everyone." I let the message end. The app offered 2 buttons. Save, delete. I chose delete. Click. Not responding is still a response. I filled the kettle and set it back on the flame. Water began to murmur. The burner ticked. The pot gathered a low halo. I watched the reflection of the flame waver on the steel. A dance without audience tonight. They have their urgency. I have my pace. Their words raised fear like dust. I let it settle. When the kettle sighed, I turned the flame off and left the water hot for morning. I wiped the counter and placed the phone on a saucer by the window, screen down, a moon set to rest. At the bedroom door, I paused and looked back at the kitchen. The cup on the sill waited for daylight. The framed photo held its place. Outside, the horizon drew a clean line that promised morning. I spoke to the room in a voice only I needed to hear. I am safe. I am clear. I will not be moved by noise. I closed the door halfway, the latch a click. The phone stayed where it was. I did not carry it. Silence followed, not a gap, an answer that knew its own weight. Morning returned with a rinsed sky and a soft breeze through the shutters. My phone waited on the saucer where I had left it. I turned it face up and opened Ruth's thread. I typed 3 words. I did not sign. I added a picture before sending. A thin stripe of sun sliding across the terracotta, bright as a bookmark in a chapter I meant to keep. A red heart lifted on the screen. Then Ruth wrote, "Live." She followed with a photo of her room's white wall. Glare washed it flat. Her shadow leaned there like a quiet witness. Printed frames sat unopened on a chair. She typed, "The staff wants a collage. I want a window." "For your wall," I sent back. I attached the sun streak and a second photo, the lemon tree tilting toward the terrace like a friendly shoulder. Isabel's basket sat open on the counter. Bread, olives, a wedge of cheese. The colors looked like a small flag for appetite. Ruth replied, "That yellow is medicine." We switched to voice for a minute. I held the phone toward the terrace rail so she could hear the sea count. A measured hush, a gull drawing a line and letting it fade. Ruth said the fountain in her lobby clicks, pretending to be water. Then she laughed in the low way she saves for things that are sad and true. I brewed tea while we talked. The kettle breathed, the room filled with steam and lemon peel. I told her I slept with the window cracked. The night folded itself around me and let me rest. She told me about yesterday's schedule: mindfulness at 4, a lecture at 6, lasagna that refused to taste like lasagna. She said she had begun walking the hall in loops. She touches the railing at each turn and pretends it is a weathered fence on a farm she knew. I said I walked the lane to the bakery. A clerk knows my face. She says darling to everyone, and it feels unpretending. I try new words on my tongue. Pan, gracias, buenas. Each one opens a small door in my ear. "Send supper," Ruth texted. I plated what I had and took a picture. Tomato and garlic softened in a pan. An egg poached inside until the white rose. Bread torn and warmed. A little oil. She wrote, "That is a prayer in a bowl." I answered, "It is lunch." She said, "You deserve to call it dinner if it feeds you." She asked what I see when I look up from the sink. I angled the camera to include the frame on the sill, our wedding photo, his suit, my unruly veil. Beyond it, the water, working without hurry. Ruth typed, "Keep that view. Claim it every morning." I told her I would, and that I am where the light is. We returned to small reports. She said the ukulele will not fit her closet. I suggested she keep it anyway and let it claim a chair. She promised to try on Sunday when her son visits. I said I would look for a print shop. I want to mail her the son photo on paper so she can tape it to the white wall with whatever tape she likes. She answered with another heart. When we ended the call, I stood in the kitchen and listened again. The apartment held my breathing without complaint. I saved the sun picture to a folder labeled Here. I set the phone down and let the light crawl inches more across the tile. In the screen's reflection, the streak looked like a river. Simple, sufficient, pointing toward the door I had chosen and the day I was learning to carry. The sea kept patient time. I whispered to the room and to Ruth across the ocean, I am where the light is. Ruth's heart still blinked on my screen when the bell at the villa gate rang, one clean note that asked for courage. I stepped into the courtyard. Laura stood on the lane with a wheeled suitcase and a face set like a signature line, crisp, final. Behind her, the sea rolled its long sentence and gathered it back. Mom, she said, we need to resolve this quickly. I opened the gate and stood aside. You came a long way, come in. She rolled the suitcase across the threshold. Bougainvillea brushed her shoulder, a petal clung to her hair. In the kitchen, I took down 2 cups with a cobalt ring, water in the kettle, flame low. I tilted my head toward the terrace. We sat where the lemon tree leaned into light. Laura's gaze moved over the white walls and the square of water, at the horizon. So this is what Dad was hiding. This is what he kept, I said. First for us, then for me. She opened a folder and slid a page across the table. The buyer is still ready. Revised number, closing fast. Sign and we transfer. You will be comfortable. Everyone can breathe. The kettle clicked. Once. I poured and set her cup before her. The spoon touched the rim. The note hung between us. I did not touch the paper. I flew overnight, she said. Please do not make this harder. I am not making it hard, I said. I am making it true. She pushed a pen toward me. What do you want exactly? I want decisions not made over me, I said, and not under your stairs. Her jaw tightened. The basement is finished. Your own bath. We cleared space. You made a plan, I said. Space is different. We listened to the sea rub the shore. Laura wrapped her fingers around the cup but did not drink. You have never been impulsive. I am not. I am careful. She tapped the page. Greg says cash like this is rare. The buyer could sue. Ben talked to a lawyer. None of that if you sign. The teaspoon lay between us like a compass. I nudged it to her saucer. If you arrive as my daughter, we can speak about what matters. If you come as a buyer, I have nothing to sell. She absorbed the sentence in silence. On the rail, a small bird tested the air and stayed. I hate that you sent the piano, she said. There is nowhere to put it. You told me logistics were handled. Do you hear yourself? You are being petty. Precise, I said. There is a difference. She pulled the folder back. The paper rasped. I grew up watching you list, budget, fix. Why stop now? Why make this complicated? I am not done keeping, I said. I am keeping myself. She looked toward the sea. The light warmed a shade. Fine, she said lower. What do you want in full? I want breakfast without a deadline. A window that opens. To be your mother, not your project. Your love without a receipt attached. Her shoulders lowered by a breath. We waited with the water. She capped the pen and set it aside. We still have to figure out the house. We will figure out many things, I said, but not today by your clock. The petal slipped from her hair to the table, magenta against white. She touched it once and finally lifted the cup. The spoon tapped, a clear note. We could walk, I said. Hear what the town says when it is not trying. She looked at the gate, then at me. 10 minutes. 10 is a beginning, I said. We stood, not in truce. In weather that might allow one. The page waited untouched. I left it there. The door to the terrace opened like it had been oiled for this hour. We stepped through it together. On the table, 2 white cups made a border. Steam lifted like flags of truce. The pen lay where she left it. The contract faced down. If she came as my child, I would pour again. As a buyer, nothing was for purchase. We walked the lane for 10 minutes and returned quieter. The sea had softened what could be softened. Back at the table, the contract still faced down. The cups were empty. I went to the bedroom and brought a cloth bundle, a strip of blue apron tied around envelopes and receipts that had learned the shape of my hands. Laura watched. "What is that?" "Not an argument," I said. "A record." I set it down and pulled the knot free. Paper loosened. A faint vanilla of old ink rose. I opened the top envelope. "This is the urgent care bill from the winter Ben broke his wrist on the loading dock," I said. "You were between jobs. You asked me to float it for a week. I paid it the day it arrived." "You never said." "You were already apologizing for the wrist," I said. I did not add the bill to the noise. I laid out the next paper. "Gas company, February, the ice storm. Your furnace quit, the landlord stalled. I put the account in my name to keep heat moving for the baby." I touched the date. 3 a.m. You whispered so she would not wake. Her eyes stayed on the date. I unfolded a handwritten receipt. "Your car alternator, the summer you were finishing night classes. You phoned from behind the grocery store? The tow man did not take cards. I drove over with cash and 2 sandwiches." A small laugh escaped her. "I forgot that." "I did not," I said. I placed a stack aside. Choir camp fees, field trips, the dorm deposit when your scholarship posted late. "This one," I tapped a bill with a red stamp, "is the ER copay from when you thought you were miscarrying. You were dehydrated. They sent crackers." I let it sit. "This is Ben's dental crown the year he lost coverage, and the power bill when his shop heater died and space unit spun the meter. 2 months of therapy copays you promised to repay and forgot. I chose not to remind you." I held up a narrow receipt with grease at the corner. "Thanksgiving. Your oven quit at 2. We moved everything to my place. You took the praise. I washed pans. I liked the day anyway." Laura's posture loosened. I kept my voice even, a librarian in the stacks. "I am not sending an invoice," I said. "I am showing what love looks like when it files itself." She touched the cloth strip. "You kept all this." "I keep more than things," I said. "I keep people." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because pain makes its own weather," I said. "When you are inside it, the last thing you need is a forecast." I chose quiet. She nodded. I gathered the pages into a thinner pile and brought out the last piece, a photocopy of a check memo line in Edward's square hand. "Tuition bridge." The amount sat between us like a bench. "He did that," she whispered. "He did," I said. "We were a team. When you called, one of us picked up. When you needed, one of us filled the gap. The only ledger that mattered was your life moving forward." She looked at the contract, then at the bundle, then at her hands. "I told Greg you were grieving and confused." "I am grieving," I said. "I am not confused." Her eyes shone but did not spill. She read the line that names the patient, set it down as if it could be hurt. "I do not recognize the mother who would move into my basement after all this." "She is the same one," I said. "She just learned a new sentence." "Which sentence?" her face asked. "Love is not invisible," I said. I chose to be quiet. We let the sea speak. A scooter rattled, a plate chimed, afternoon moved. "What do I do with this?" she asked, touching the apron cloth. "Keep it, or let me keep it. Knowing is the point." She folded the cloth with care. "I do not know how to say sorry big enough." "You do not have to," I said. "You only have to stop calling theft a plan." She flinched, then nodded. "I did that." "You did," I said. "Now you can choose not to." She looked at the horizon. "I do not want your money." "I know. I want my mother." "I am at this table," I said, "and the window opens." Night pressed the town into hush as we walked the promenade. Lamps made islands on the paving stones. The water stitched and unstitched its edge. Laura kept pace half a step ahead, suitcase left at the villa, folder still on my table. The air had the taste of salt and iron. The tide spoke in a long breath. Wind combed our hair and tugged the hems of our jackets. We reached a strip of firm sand and stepped down. Our shoes printed crescents. Then another wave came close and erased the first story, as if the evening were rehearsing mercy. I slowed until she matched me. The town trailed light behind us. Farther out, a fisherman's lamp burned like a patient star. "I need clarity," Laura said. "No more theater. Tell me your plan." I watched our tracks accumulate and vanish. "There is nothing theatrical about limits," I said. "They are the floor you stand on when the room tilts." She folded her arms. The wind lifted her hair. "I came here to solve a problem. Do you want our help or not?" "I do not want rescue," I said. "I want respect." She exhaled through her nose, impatient. "You could have told me everything months ago. The villa, the money, the paperwork. Instead, you turned it into a test." "Not a test," I said, a boundary remembered out loud. We walked another length. The sea answered itself. A gull rode a loose circle and went silent. My feet found the rhythm of the shore. Step. Breathe. Listen. Answer. "Say it plainly," she said. "I'm not selling me," I said. "The house either." She stopped. "You would keep both when we are drowning. That is cruelty disguised as principle." "You are not drowning," I said. "You are busy and scared and in debt. You want my roof to be your raft. That is not survival. That is theft with paperwork." She stared at the dark water. "I do not recognize this voice." "This is the same voice that signed field trip slips at midnight and sat in waiting rooms at dawn," I said. "It is steady. It is simply pointed toward me now." We stood where the tide could reach and retreat. Foam printed our shoes, then retreated. "I am your mother," I said. "You may come as my daughter, but if you come as a buyer, I have nothing to sell." Wind braided our silence. She pushed her hands into her pockets like a girl. "What do you expect me to tell Ben and Greg?" "Tell them you spoke to the owner," I said. "Tell them the property is not for sale." She laughed once, a small sound that wanted to be brave. "You always find the one sentence that shuts a door." "Doors do their job," I said. "They open and shut." We walked back toward the steps. "You think I do not love you," she said. "I think you do not recognize love when it refuses to bankrupt itself." On the stairs, I paused and faced her. "Do not explain, just go." That was your father's line. Here is mine. Do not explain, just come. If you come for me, the door opens. If you come for money, it closes. She bit her lip and nodded once, as if to memorize the terms. The wind pressed our jackets flat. The sea kept counting. Above us, the lamps hummed. Below us, our last footprints blurred into one smooth sheet. On the sand, I drew a line with my toe, a border. The next wave reached, tasted it, and withdrew. Back at the gate, I waited with the key. "You are welcome to sleep here tonight," I said, "as my child. In the morning, we will see who wakes up inside the house." She looked past me into the courtyard. Bougainvillea leaned like a gentle crowd. "I will try," she said. "Trying counts," I said. I turned the key. The latch gave its clean consonant. We crossed the threshold without speaking. Behind us, the shore rolled its sentence forward. Ahead of us lay cups and a table, and a quiet that refused to lie for either of us. Morning unstitched the night. Pale light found the white walls and climbed them like a gentle vine. I woke to the hush that follows a hard conversation, the body listening for footsteps that did not come. In the kitchen, I set water to heat and opened the shutters halfway. Air moved through the room with the easy manners of a guest who knows when to speak and when to stay quiet. Laura came down the hall in socks, hair pulled into a knot that leaned to one side. She sat at the table and watched the terrace. The bougainvillea made shadows like lace against the tile. I set a cup in front of her and another at my place. We did not begin with words. A knock at the side gate. Isabel's bracelets chimed. She balanced a small tray on one hand, a paper bag in the other. "Pain d'assiette," she said, oil bread still warm under brown paper. 2 little pastries painted with apricot. She placed the tray and looked from Laura to me with a kindness that made space. "Good morning," she said, and left us to it. Steam braided above the kettle. I sliced the bread. The knife whispered. The crust cracked in a gentle sigh. I put butter in a small dish and warmed it with the back of the spoon. I set another plate on the table without comment. Laura watched my hands carefully. When the tea was steeped, I poured and set the pot back on its woven trivet. We ate. The bread tasted like a simple decision. The jam made the tongue remember summer. Our posture unhooked by degrees. The sea kept its metronome. Gulls wrote short phrases and fell quiet again. She broke a pastry and slid half across to my plate. I accepted and nodded. "Thank you," she said, almost a question. "Breakfast," I said, not a lesson, an offering. She looked at my cup, the chip on the rim, the way I placed it near the window as if the view could season the tea. "Dad would have loved this," she said. "He chose it with your future in mind," I said, "and mine." We ate more, slower. The street gets bright at noon. The baker smiles with her whole face. The lemon tree is leaning. Each small line held the room open a little wider. I stood and brought a small plate, pale blue. I set it near Laura's hand. She looked at it, then at me. I did not fill the silence with instructions. She placed the last pastry on the plate and moved it to the center between us. A tiny ceremony neither of us named. We finished without urgency. I cleared the cups. The china chimed. The sink took warm water and held it. Laura dried one plate with a towel and set it upright in the rack. She took another and did the same. The normal work of a morning admitted us back the way a forgiving room does. When the dishes were done, she stood at the terrace rail and watched the square of sea beyond the rooftops. "I thought selling would fix things," she said. "I thought speed was kindness." "Speed is anesthesia," I said. "It keeps you from feeling the cut until later." She nodded and pressed her palms flat on the rail. For a long minute, we listened to water and wind and the tiny motors of a town waking. I returned to the table and laid another small plate down. Empty, clean. The act felt like placing a quiet vote. When not buying or selling, breakfast returns to being breakfast. I did not speak it. I let the room carry it. Laura turned and caught my eye. "Thank you for the extra plate," she said. "You are welcome," I said, and meant everything the words could carry. Very much. By afternoon, the sun leaned softer. The kitchen held a citrus afterglow. Laura stood at the windowsill where Edward's picture kept watch. Her finger traced the frame. A question gathered. "Did you bring the letter from the house?" I asked. She unzipped her bag and took out the craft page, folded once. A faint tea ring marked the corner where I had weighted it. She held it with both hands. "I found it on the table. I read it in the car, then again on the plane." She glanced at the photo. It made me angry. Then it made me quiet. "It was meant to name one true thing," I said, in case noise swallowed the rest. She nodded and opened the paper. Her mouth shaped the first line without sound. Then she read one sentence aloud. "Love is understanding the cost of every sleepless night." The page trembled once. She pressed it to her chest. "I want to keep this." "You may," I said. We sat. Laura set the letter flat between us. "I told Greg I'm stepping back," she said. "He called it killing momentum. I told him momentum almost killed my mother." I moved my chair closer to the table's edge. "What do you need now?" "I need time," she said. "Time to return my head to my body. Time to tell Ben I will not be the shape of his fear. Time to look at why I turned you into a plan." "So do I," I said. I kept the gate key in my pocket and drew a map for the days ahead. Small squares, not grand plans. Monday and Thursday, Spanish at the community center. Tuesday mornings, the market. Afternoons, the garden. Evenings, the kitchen with the window open to the sea. Isabel knocked with 2 aprons and a basket of peppers. She said, "Hoy cocinamos," and pressed a sprig of thyme into my palm like a blessing. In class, the teacher wrote hola on the board and made us open our mouths wider than we were used to. I said it 3 times. Each sounded less like a visitor and more like a neighbor. We learned please and thank you, and how to ask for bread at the bakery without pointing. After class, an elderly man practicing verbs asked if I was from the States. I nodded. He said his daughter lives in Phoenix. We both smiled at the heat and let the conversation rest. The garden taught me too. I kneaded soil with my fingers and learned which pots keep water, which ones surrender it too quickly. I cut the roses back with a small fear and a larger patience. They answered in green. The lemon tree shed a leaf onto my shoe. It smelled clean and hopeful. I swept the terrace and set the broom against the wall where the light sits at 4 o'clock. The broom's shadow stretched long, then shorter, a metronome that asked nothing of me except to stand there and notice. In the kitchen, Isabel showed me how to char peppers over a gas flame without flinching. She said, "Turn them until the skin blisters and sings, then hide them in a bowl and let the steam peel what no knife can." We tore the dark skin away. We pressed garlic with the flat of a knife. We salted with fingers until the sauce understood. I learned to crack an egg into simmering tomato and wait. Patience is heat you can taste. We ate with bread we tore, oil we poured, and our wrists resting on the cool table. We planned a market day. I would learn names for herbs in Spanish and let them live in my mouth. I joined a reading circle at the library, near the port. 5 of us came on Wednesdays. We chose thin books and read them slowly. I heard my voice return to its librarian weight as I offered a question and waited without rescuing the silence. A woman named Pilar cried at a paragraph about a house that refused to be sold. She laughed after and said crying in public is good for the eyes. We all agreed with relief. At night, I opened a small leather notebook and wrote 1 true thing per page. The first line I gave my future was simple. I am here. I am not a guest. Some nights the page took a scent from the day, lemon or smoke or the damp after I washed the floor. The pen moved without hurry. The letters looked older than the words, and that felt right. My hand has done years of work. I wrote, "No one calls, but the heart answers." I wrote, "The sea keeps time better than the clock." I wrote, "This bowl of soup was enough." I placed the notebook on the windowsill beside the framed photo. The spine warmed in the late sun. Then I brewed tea and stood where I could see the horizon flatten into silver. I let quiet speak. In this new life, the victories were small, and because they were small, they added up. A perfect slice of pepper, a correct vowel, a rose that decided to try again. I closed the window when the gulls did and went to bed with salt in my hair, and a map for tomorrow rolled inside my ribs like a gentle tide. Late afternoon light thinned to a pale gold. The shutters breathed. I was slicing peppers for tomorrow when the phone buzzed against the saucer. I dried my hands and pressed play. The icon waited, patient. Ben's voice arrived, smaller than usual. "Nora, it is me. I am calling without Laura." I wanted to say I am sorry about the lawyer talk. I was afraid of the mortgage on the shop and the slow season and the number I owe the supplier. I said you were unstable to a stranger because it kept me from saying I was scared. That was wrong. I heard about the piano and the boxes. I know what you were saying without saying it. You kept things I dropped. You kept people when we were messy. I do not want to fight you. If you want me to call Greg and end this, I will. I should have come over with my hands and not my advice. I am sorry. I do not know where you are, and I think that is your right. If you are safe, that is what matters. If you need me to fix the furnace, I still remember how." He laughed once and then stopped. "I am turning off the emails about the buyer. I will tell Laura I am done scaring you into moving. I am done calling it concern." Silence followed, long enough that I thought he had hung up. Then he added, "Thank you for the crown and the heater and the bolts. I found the tin. I will sort them." The line clicked. The screen offered me two options: save, delete. I chose neither for a breath and watched the light in the kitchen sway. A gull crossed the square of sky like a quick sentence. My reflection rode the dark screen, a woman with salt in her hair and a steady shoulder. I pressed delete. The tiny chime sounded final and kind. I set the phone face down on the table, the camera toward the ceiling, the weight of it small and exact. Fear is not a reason to take away someone's eve. I set it to the growing shadow on the wall and let the sentence stand. The surf deepened its hum. The apartment cooled. I finished slicing peppers, placed the knife flat and breathed. In this house, not responding still counts as a response. 2 weeks later, I flew back to the States for a short list of signatures and a promise I meant to keep. Marisol had prepared the binder, tabs like flags, deeds, trust, utilities, a letter that rerouted all inquiries to her office. I signed where she pointed. We closed what needed closing and opened what needed opening. She handed me certified copies and said, "Travel light." I slipped the binder into my bag and stepped into air that tasted like late spring. The next morning, I drove to our old town. The streets remembered my turns. I parked by the house and stood on the sidewalk. The hedge was taller, the paint a little duller. The porch still carried the mark where Ben's skateboard kissed the step. I did not go in. I walked the side path to the gate, reached over, and chose one rose that had opened imperfectly. It was not theft. It was a kept promise between a gardener and a season. I wrapped the stem in a paper towel and set it on the passenger seat like a guest. The cemetery sits on a small hill where wind practices. I walked between stones that said many versions of beloved and teacher. A groundskeeper tipped his cap. Edward's marker held its clean serif letters. I stood until my breath found the hill's pace. I set the rose at the base, then knelt and pressed the stem into soft earth. "Hi," I said, and the air accepted it. I reported the truth. Signatures done. Refusals made. The villa white. Bougainvillea generous. Isabel tending time. Spanish learning inching forward. Laura came with a contract and left with receipts and a question she might grow into understanding. Ben called to say he was sorry. For once I did not fill the silence, and the silence did its job. I can hear the sea when I wash dishes. Our wedding photo sits on a sill where the light is kind. I am writing a small book for myself, one true thing per page. The first line works like a key. "I have gone, just as you asked," I whispered. The wind lifted my scarf and set it down again. A crow perched nearby, a witness. I stood and brushed my knees. The groundskeeper raked 2 rows over. The tines made a sound like handwriting. I placed my palm on the stone the way you touch a hood after a long drive. "Thank you," I said, "for the roof we built and the way you kept me under the eave. 40 years I kept a family standing. Now I keep myself." The words did not echo. They settled. I listened a while longer there. I stepped back and let the hill take me in. On the way out, I signed to plant a rose bush near his plot in May. It felt like permission for the ground to keep telling the right story. In the car, I set the paper towel on the seat, a quiet flag. I drove past the house again. The porch light was on, though it was noon. I let it be a sign that someone was trying to be careful. I merged onto the highway toward the airport, the binder buckled beside me. At a red light, an old song came on, and I did not skip it. I sang in a voice grown steady. I repeated the line I wrote my first night in Spain. "I am here. I am not a guest." The road agreed by becoming a runway. The runway agreed by becoming air. The sun lays a copper path across the water. I sit on the terrace with my leather notebook and ease a thin ticket from its pocket. "One day we will go," Edward wrote on the back. The ink bears a tiny tear where rain once landed. I set the ticket between pages like a quiet mast. The sea breathes. Bougainvillea rustles above. My pen waits in my hand the way a key does in a lock. I write one true line for the night. I am here. I am not a guest. I look toward the gate and think of the doors I have closed without slamming, the ones I have opened without asking permission. Love is not a receipt. It is the chair kept warm and the light left on. If Laura comes as my daughter, there is bread and tea. If she comes as a buyer, there is nothing for sale. I hold the ticket to the sky. It glows thin as a petal. It belongs to our beginning and to mine. I breathe until my ribs make room for tomorrow. The horizon answers with a steady line of silver. Before we say goodbye, I would love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you. Remember, sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. Take care. We will meet in the next story. The water darkens to slate. The horizon keeps its promise. The pen slides back into the notebook. I tuck the ticket under the ribbon and stand. Evening carries the salt inward. I breathe it in, the kind of breath with room for tomorrow. A gull writes a mark across the sky and disappears. I touch the gate key. Metal is warm. I speak the sentence that steadies my steps. Do not explain, just go.